Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Terror and Urban Myths. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a like if you enjoy what we do. Today, we're going to be looking at something that I think, kind of hits home for a lot of people. The feeling of vulnerability and unease you can get sometimes, even when you're supposed to be having fun.
It's true. Sometimes the line between reality and fantasy can get pretty blurry in some unsettling ways.
That's exactly right. We're going to be looking into a story today that takes place at a LARPing event. LARPing is usually a place where people feel free to escape, to imagine, to go on adventures.
LARPing is about community. It's about sharing that escapism. That's a big draw for a lot of LARPers, that chance to step outside the normal world and into this world of imagination.
Exactly. But in this story, that sense of safety is completely shattered when one of the participants, a guy named Greg, starts exhibiting some behavior that it crosses the line. It goes way beyond what's acceptable, even in a LARP setting.
What's interesting here is that this guy, Greg, he actually blends in with the LARP community at first. He uses the fantasy setting almost as a cover for what seems like, well, are they predatory intentions? I mean, that's what it turns out to be.
Right. And at first his actions just seem like maybe they're harmless, maybe he's just flirting, a little awkward, a little over the top, nothing too alarming, maybe he's a little too touchy-feely, maybe he gets a little too close, or maybe he's making comments that are, they're more suggestive than playful.
It's about these subtle transgressions. Perpetrators often use these as a way to test boundaries to see how a potential victim will respond. It's a gradual escalation. It slowly erodes someone's comfort and safety.
And that is, sadly, where things start to, they take a darker turn. Greg becomes fixated on a woman, we'll call her Sarah. He starts to follow her around the event, making these unwanted advances, ignoring all the signals she's giving him that she's not interested.
And that persistence, that refusal to respect her boundaries, is a hallmark, really, of predatory behavior. It's about exerting control, about dominance, not genuine connection or respect.
It's like he's trying to isolate her from the rest of her friends, make her feel trapped, make her feel vulnerable.
That's classic abuser tactics, isolation. It's about separating the victim from their support network. The abuser then gains more control. It makes it harder for the victim to seek help.
And there's this one point in Sarah's story where Greg he waits for her on this secluded trail. It's away from the main arboring area. He tries to lure her deeper into the woods, saying they need to find this rare plant for his character.
This is a clear escalation. He's trying to isolate Sarah, make her more vulnerable, take her to a secluded area. This is predatory behavior, no question. He's not relying on subtle cues anymore. He's actively manipulating the situation.
He's using this fantasy setting to mask his real intentions, trying to blur the line between the LARP world and reality. He's making Sarah question what she's seeing and feeling, and it makes it harder for her to reach out for help.
That's right, that manipulation of context. It's a tactic perpetrators often use. They exploit these situations where boundaries are already blurred, where it's difficult for the victim to even understand or explain what's happening to them.
So Sarah, thankfully, she realizes the danger. She refuses to go with Greg. She tries to brush him off, but he gets aggressive. He grabs her arm and tries to force her to come with him.
And that escalation to physical force, that's a very clear indicator of Greg's intentions. He doesn't care about seeming harmless anymore. He's resorting to brute force.
It's terrifying to think how quickly a fun, safe environment can become a complete nightmare.
It reminds us that predators are everywhere, even in places that are supposed to be all about community and shared enjoyment. They take advantage of our trust, our assumptions about safety, to manipulate and harm others.
Sarah manages to break free and run back to the main LARPing area. She tells her friends what happened right away. They rally around her. They're ready to confront Greg. They're ready to protect their friend.
That's the kind of collective response you need in a situation like this. It shows the power of community, how important bystander intervention is. When people stand up against this kind of behavior, it sends a message that perpetrators will be held accountable.
It's a great example of how a community can come together to support and protect each other, even when there's danger. It shows the power of solidarity, how important it is to speak out against abuse.
The LARPing community here becomes this force for justice and accountability. They refuse to let Greg get away with it. They use their power as a group to protect Sarah and make sure he's removed from the event.
And Greg, faced with this unified front, he is expelled from the event. He tries to defend himself, but no one believes him, and they make him leave. His little fantasy world comes crashing down.
This expulsion, it's a victory. It shows that this community won't tolerate abuse or harassment. They're committed to making their space safe and welcoming for everyone.
But even though Greg is gone, Sarah's, well, she's shaken up. She's traumatized. The sense of safety and camaraderie that she once felt is gone. It's been tainted by Greg's behavior.
This is, unfortunately, a common thing for survivors of abuse and harassment to experience. Even when the immediate threat is gone, the emotional and psychological scars remain. It makes it hard to trust, hard to feel safe, even in future interactions.
So the impact of an experience like this, it goes way beyond the event itself. The feeling of vulnerability, of violation, it stays with the survivor long after the perpetrator is gone. It affects their sense of self, their relationships. It affects their ability to enjoy things they used to love.
It's important to acknowledge and validate those feelings of trauma. Survivors need support, understanding. They need resources to process what they've been through and to heal.
Sarah's story is a really powerful reminder that even spaces meant for escapism and fun can be places where predators exist. They take advantage of our trust, our vulnerability. It highlights how important it is to be vigilant, to set boundaries, and to speak out when we see unacceptable behavior.
It's a call to action, an invitation to create a culture of awareness and accountability. It's up to us to challenge harmful behavior and support those who have been harmed.
And it's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, community can be a source of strength, of resilience, of hope.
You know, thinking about Sarah and what she went through at that LARPing event, you have to wonder, how common are these types of things? We think of LARPing as, it's a hobby, not something everyone does, but could this be a sign of a bigger problem, in other hobby communities or even society as a whole?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Sarah's story takes place at a LARP event, but abuse and harassment can happen anywhere people gather.
Absolutely. So then what can we do to make things safer, not just for LARPing, but in all parts of our lives?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Well, one crucial step is to build a culture of awareness, to understand what abuse and harassment look like. We need to be able to spot the early warning signs of someone who might be a predator.
It's so easy to just dismiss those early warning signs, especially somewhere like a LARP, where the lines between reality and fantasy, they're already blurred.
Exactly. Trust your gut. If someone's behavior makes you feel uncomfortable, even if they haven't done anything super aggressive, speak up or get out of the situation.
That's easier said than done. Speaking up can be hard, especially when you're dealing with someone who's manipulative or intimidating.
You're right. It's not always easy. That's why it's so important to have a good support system. Friends, family, people you can talk to, people who will have your back, both inside and outside of your hobbies.
So having that group of people you can trust, that you can confide in, that's essential.
Absolutely. You need to have that sense of community, that feeling that people will listen to you and support each other. What about the people who run these communities, the organizers, the leaders? What can they do to make things safer?
Yeah, what can they do?
They set the tone, they make the rules, they need to have clear rules against harassment and abuse, and they need to enforce them.
So it's not enough to just say, be respectful. You need to get more specific.
Right. You need a code of conduct. Spell out exactly what behaviors are unacceptable, what happens if someone breaks the rules, how people can report incidents.
That makes sense. It creates a structure, shows that you're serious about these issues.
And just as importantly, they need to be proactive. Create a welcoming environment, inclusive, a place where everyone feels respected and safe.
Where people can be themselves without fear.
Exactly. It's about encouraging understanding, empathy, open communication. What about bystanders? We talked about Sarah's friends standing up for her, but what can people do if they see something happening? If they witness someone being harassed?
Yeah, that's an important question.
Bystander intervention. It can be as simple as distracting the harasser or just listening to the victim.
So even those small gestures of support can make a difference.
Absolutely. You're showing the victim that they're not alone, that someone cares. And what about reporting? Should you always report harassment or abuse, even if it doesn't directly involve you?
It's tricky, isn't it?
Reporting is important. It helps hold the abuser accountable and makes things safer for everyone.
But it can be scary, especially if you think there might be retaliation or that no one will believe you.
Those are valid concerns. But remember, you have options. You can report anonymously, talk to someone you trust, like a friend or a mentor, or there are organizations that help survivors of abuse. They can give you guidance.
So reaching out for help, for support, that's always a good step, even if you don't know exactly what to do.
Exactly. It's about finding those resources, finding your path to healing and to justice.
This has been a really insightful conversation. Making things safer, it's multifaceted. We need to educate ourselves, raise awareness, hold people accountable, and we need to build those support networks.
It's a group effort. We're all responsible for challenging harmful behavior and building places where everyone can feel safe. Sarah's experience, as awful as it was, it can help us make positive changes. If we learn from it, if we take action, we can work toward a world where no one has to experience harassment or abuse.
As we're wrapping up this conversation about Sarah's story and how to make hobby communities safer, I keep thinking about this shared responsibility, It can't just be on the victims to protect themselves. We all have to work together to stop this kind of behavior from happening in the first place.
I completely agree. It's not enough to just react when something bad happens. We need to focus on preventing these things from happening at all. And that means changing how we think and talk about these issues.
So, how do we actually do that? Where do we even start?
Well, first, we have to admit that these problems are real. We can't ignore them or pretend they're just isolated incidents. This is about power, about harmful norms that are built into our society.
And those norms, they can be so ingrained, so deep that we don't even realize how much they contribute to these harmful behaviors.
Exactly. We need to be having honest conversations about consent, about boundaries, about respect. We have to challenge the idea that it's okay to excuse bad behavior as boys being boys or to blame the victim.
It's about accountability, holding each other accountable, not just for our own actions, but for what we see happening around us.
Exactly. Bystander intervention is so important. We need to be willing to speak up, even when it's hard, even when we're afraid of making things worse.
But how do we do that effectively? It's easy to say we should intervene, but in the moment when things are heated, it's different.
There are resources out there, training programs that teach you how to intervene safely, how to be effective.
So we can learn how to be better bystanders, how to help in those situations.
And it's not just about knowing what to do in that moment. It's about creating a culture where people feel like they can speak up, that they'll be heard, that they'll be taken seriously.
It's not just reacting, it's about preventing these things from happening at all.
Exactly. We need to build a foundation of respect, of empathy, of accountability. It needs to be woven into everything we do, how we interact with each other, and that's a process. We need to keep talking, keep learning, and be willing to challenge ourselves and our own biases.
Today we've talked about some dark topics: human behavior, fear of the unknown, the importance of staying safe. But I hope our listeners are leaving feeling, not just informed, but also like they can make a difference.
Me too. These stories we've shared, they're unsettling, but they also show how resilient people can be. They show how much we're capable of when we come together, when we show compassion, when we take action. Let's use that energy to build a world where everyone feels safe, where everyone is respected, where everyone can just live their lives to the fullest.
Thank you so much for joining us on Terror and Urban Myths. If anything we talked about today has resonated with you, please reach out for help. There are resources available. You don't have to go through this alone. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and give us a like. It really helps us out. We'll be back soon with another episode, another deep dive into a new topic. Until then, take care, everyone.